This video is sponsored by Squarespace, but I'll tell you more about them a bit later on. Often what makes an artwork feel good is a hidden set of rules that we all subconsciously or consciously follow when planning an artwork. And those are the rules of composition. So in this video, I'm going to dive into my process of how I compose my artworks. We can all feel if something's composition is off, and there's often an emotional reaction if something's composition is right and pleasing. A lot of us actually just do this naturally. But when we start picking apart what it is, when we see things arranged in a particular way that is pleasing, things start getting interesting. To try and describe my process a bit, I know composition is important, but at what stage should I start considering it? I often just jump into the planning process, throwing things onto my imaginary canvas until something starts to take shape. And then going into my planning photo shoots, I'm not usually that concerned about composition at this point. I'm mostly concerned with lighting and perspective, but I think those are for another video. Only once I actually have something to place on the boundaries of my paper do these hidden principles start to become really important. Composition is such a dense topic. There's a bunch of elements that can be really overwhelming to consider. Things like unity, balance, movement, rhythm, focus, contrast, pattern, and proportion. If you really want to dive into it, these are things that you can study to help improve your work. With practice, these slowly become second nature. There's a kind of visual language or a visual literacy. My video editor Jess really enjoys talking about this, but this refers to the story that an artwork tells, or at least the journey that your eye takes around an artwork. And composition can help you populate the story in a simple but very effective way. If you're interested, there's some base structures which can be pretty easy to dive into. The first one being the rule of thirds, which a lot of us know. The rule of thirds is a composition guideline that places the subject in the left or right third, leaving the other 2/3 more open. The rule of thirds generally leads to compelling and well-composed shots. You also get full frame, the Fibonacci golden ratio, symmetry, and pyramid. The Fibonacci sequence, a sequence of numbers in which each number is the sum of the two preceding numbers. The simplest series is 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, etc. The Fibonacci sequence is something that has fascinated me for my entire career. There's a beauty and simplicity to this sequence. You see it in the center of the sunflower, or in the spiral of the Milky Way galaxy, or in nautilus shells, even ram's horns, amongst other things. It's a fundamental testament to symmetry and natural order. And a large part of art is about imitating innate beauty. The golden ratio is an extremely important number to mathematicians. Artists use this golden ratio because it's aesthetically pleasing. The golden ratio can be used in art to achieve beauty, balance, and harmony. I just want to interrupt here quickly. Jess and I have been watching back the edit, and we thought that, this is Jess by the way, and we thought that this might seem a little bit overcomplicated with all of these numbers. The takeaway is just that these numbers have been distilled into this grid, which is the grid that I use most of the time with my work. At the end of the day, these are just guidelines. This is something to facilitate your creative expression.
Like rules are meant to be broken.
Yeah, you can choose some of the rules that resonate with you, and you can let go of the ones that seem overcomplicated or that don't help your process. The composition grid that I use is a very simple one. I divide the page from corner to corner, finding the center point, and from there dividing the page into quadrants, and then just connecting all the points. This gives me my thirds and my sevenths. I have a template of this grid which I often overlay on my planning in Photoshop. Often when the composition already feels good, and I check it with the grid, things are already intersecting with the grid at key points. This kind of overlaps with the gridding method, which I haven't really spoken about much, a way of just gridding your page and your reference to try and get your proportions correct. When I just started out, I was using a 1 centimeter grid, and that was so slow and arduous and stagnant, but it did help me get a bit of confidence knowing that my drawing would at least be in proportion. I later on upgraded to a 2 centimeter grid, which gave me a bit more freedom and sped up my process in a huge way, and ultimately landing on the golden ratio composition grid, which is way looser and still helps me get my proportions accurate while not staggering me too much and slowing down the drawing process. An easy way to show you how I've used this grid is to overlay it with some of my artwork so you can see the thinking and how the grid kind of dictated where the subject was positioned on the canvas. So there are some very obvious pieces like Mother's Hands. This actually references the Fibonacci spiral, but also intersects with a lot of the lines for the composition grid. Stag Queen was one of my earlier works, and using one of the diagonals from the top right to the center point, this was kind of a very strong line going straight through the subject's head and the line of sight. Then I wanted to try and contain the horns in the top half, so everything kind of happens there, and then using that center strong line with one of those horns as well as basically an anchor pulling you through. I often use the grid to try and just contain my pieces, so I'd bring them right to the boundary of that grid. So in this piece here, you can see the orb basically just gets to touching that boundary with the thumbs perfectly intersecting the diagonal and the fingers underneath intersecting those bottom grid lines. Then you can see it very clearly here in pieces like in its grip, just that very strong angle going from the top corner to the midpoint, and then also using a very strong centerpiece as well to anchor the composition. Solitude was another very intentional piece with the grid. You can see how the grid lines are basically just intersecting and containing the subject matter. Even the pieces in the background are trying to be contained within the grid. You can see it coming into play in both of these pieces, the hot air balloon being supported by that strong diagonal, again having the center line anchor the artwork. You can see it's something that I've really stuck to in a lot of my artworks. It's basically become second nature for me to try and use this composition grid to tell the story and to help the eye move around really easily through the artwork. Composition can be such an overwhelming thing. I think trying to study all of these and learn all these things is a slow process. It's beneficial and it's something that soon becomes second nature and you start to do it naturally. It's also to say that we do a lot of these things naturally to begin with, but some of us need a little bit more help, and it just is always useful to study principles that people have spent a lot of time figuring out. It just does elevate your artwork. Before I end this video, I just want to give a quick shout out to this video sponsor, Squarespace. I've been working with them for a couple of years now and they've played a huge role in my career. Not only in helping me maintain this channel and sponsoring these videos, but early on in my career, I was looking for a way to showcase my work and a way to make it easy for clients and collectors to find me and get in touch with me. I also didn't have time to learn HTML and figure out how to build a website, and I found that Squarespace just did all of that effortlessly. I've never had to upgrade or patch anything. I could register a domain with them and set up an online store, and most importantly, I could design a portfolio and show my work the way that I wanted to. Also, every time I got stuck, their amazing support team helped me out instantly. So if you're looking at building a website, use this offer code and get 10% off your first purchase. If you found this video helpful, please leave a like. It helps the channel out in a huge way. And if you have any tips or tricks that you can share with us in the comment section, I really enjoy reading the comments and just learning a ton. There's a lot of information out there and it's just helpful to have a bit of a community just sharing all of that knowledge. So yeah, thanks for the support and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.